Hey guys, Stealth here. In this deck review I'm looking at a deck that was sent in by Echo. It's a Blue Dragons Marines deck. So with this deck you can do all sorts of interesting things as long as you have a naval zone. Of course, Marine decks can also really fend for themselves in city maps where their infantry can really mess up the enemy. But of course their main strength is from having a lot of slots in that naval section. So we're definitely going to be looking at this section and seeing what kind of units he has in there. He says that this map is designed specifically for the map D-Day in Paradise, so we can expect a very large map where we have quite some urban areas, or at least some forested areas. So this is where some of the tanks might come in handy, the infantry might come in handy, and I'm assuming that he means the another D-Day in Paradise map where you have the new DLC version. So this is where you also have a naval zone on the water, sorry, a command zone on the water, and that is something that you want to be able to capture. So let's have a look what he has in here. He has two command units over here. He has the Bonbu command infantry in the chopper, and then he has the Mitsubishi CV. You don't really get a lot of options here. I don't think that the Mitsubishi CV in this one is the best option, because this infantry command already gives you 4 command units, and then you have 11 in total. What I would do here is delete the Mitsubishi CV and go for the Hachi Nishiki, because this one for 30 points gives you, I believe, slightly more mobility, an off-road speed of 45 kph higher, which is definitely important if you want to hide this thing somewhere far off-road. And you get some armor. Of course you get a Browning, but that's only really a last resort weapon, and usually by far not enough to be able to destroy the enemy infantry unit or other unit that's engaging your CV. So let's go with these, and that should give us 9 command vehicles, should be enough. Then a fob, a 1 card of CH-47 logistics choppers, and this is the only logistics chopper that we can get for Blue Dragons. And the cargo trucks. Again, you don't really get any interesting cargo trucks. You got the K511 cargos, or the Chugata cargos. I think that they have exactly the same stats. Yeah, these are pretty much exactly the same unit in a different shape. So let's just stick with the K511s. I'm not a big fan of these, because their off-road speed is not that good. They don't carry that many supplies, but it's all we got to go with, so let's do it then. Moving on to infantry, where we find 2 cards of Hebyung 90. Both of these are in the KM900s, which are just standard transports. They have some armor, 1 on every side. They have an M2 Browning, but otherwise they're nothing special. What you could do here, depending on how much mobility you want out of your deck, is get one of these cards in the UH-1H. Their autonomy is not exactly stellar at only 300 kilometers. They, well, depending on how big the map is, these guys might be set up for a one-way trip. And with that, you're going to have to be a bit careful where you go and how you take your route there, because sometimes these helos will run out of fuel. Keep that in mind. You might need to bring one of those Chinook cargos if you want to make a very long flight with these guys. Another unit that I would be expecting here is the LVTP-7. It does not carry the grenade launcher. That's the LVTP-7A1 from the American decks, but it does have a lot more armor, and its mobility is pretty much the same, except for off-road speed, which is 65 versus 100. But considering that you're going to be usually dropping these guys off in the middle of the battle, you might want to have something a little more heavily armored than the KM900, and it doesn't affect your availability at all. You still get 10 of these. So what I'm going to do is delete one of those cards and get them in the LVTP-7s. The other one, the KM900, I'm also going to delete and make sure that these guys are in the UH-1H. Reason for this is that I'm looking ahead to the point where you can have a naval zone or a landing zone that's being captured by your naval tab, and he doesn't have any infantry in here. He doesn't have any landing forces, which is perfectly fine, but you might want to have the capacity to drop off command infantry, and he already has that, and some escorts, like the Hebung 90s in the UH-1H. So with a setup like this, you can actually drop off these guys next to a neutral or captured command zone and start to defend it with the Hebung 90s. So that's why I'm not going to go with the KM900. The price for the LVTP7s is exactly the same. You're only going to pay 5 points more for the UH-1H. That gives us 20 Hebung 90s. It should be enough. Let's have a look at the other ones. He has a ton of AA in here. The Type 91s and the Mistrals. I usually don't roll out with 15 AA infantry. I think this is way too many of these units. The Mistrals are pretty good. Actually, they're some of the best AA manpads in the game. They get a great range, great accuracy, an HE power of 5. The PSAM is slightly worse in range, 2450 and 1960 versus 70% accuracy, which is 10% higher. I'm not sure why he's going to go with a ton of these guys, but I definitely want to keep the Mistral in, but I'm going to delete at least one card of these PSAMs for now. He has these at Veteran, by the way. Both the Mistrals and the PSAMs, so I'm going to delete one, and that still gives us 10 of these guys. Now, another unit that you can use here is the Kutai 90, which is the elite troopers for Japan. They are, compared to the Hebung 90, not even that good, I'm sorry to say. They might be a little better against infantry with their accuracy on the Hoa 89F Shiki. They carry the Mini-Me, which I believe is slightly better than the K3 LMG, but their anti-tank weapon is significantly inferior to what the Hebungs carry. And the Hebungs are a 15-man squad. So I'm not going to look into the Kutai too much. Other units are the UDT Seals, which are great units, but again, their weapon system compared to the Hebung is not that good. They also carry the Carl Gustav. Panzerfaust 3 is going to blow that thing out of the water any day. 24 armor penetration. The M60 Shorty, it's not bad, but I think that the K3 LMG is pretty similar on stats. The range is a little bit less. Their accuracy is better. Even the stabilizer on this thing is better. And the rate of fire is higher. But the suppression of this thing is a little bit better because it fires a higher caliber round. Still, it's not exactly the infantry we're looking for. Hudao Rens could be used here. Those recoilless rifles can do definitely a lot of damage to infantry and vehicles, except that these guys only fire at vehicles because they are not a fire support squad. They cannot go after infantry. Unfortunately, we don't get access to the fire support squad. Oh, sorry, yeah, here it is. This is the fire support squad that can also deal HE damage to infantry. Getting these guys to set up ambushes could work, but I don't think that these things are really worth it. Unfortunately, we cannot bring any more Hebung 90s. We got those cards maxed out, 2 out of 2. Going back to the basic Hebung is definitely something you do not want to do, because for 25 points, these guys are not that good. You got the M72 Law on them, and that's a drop in armor penetration of 11 points. They do gain 3 more missiles, but the 11 armor penetration that you lose is very, very deadly. And by deadly, I mean it's very detrimental to the Hebung base version. So we're not going to go with those. Gongbyung napalm troops might work here. It depends a little bit on where you want to operate and how many infantry units you can expect there. But considering that it's another D-Day in Paradise, you could be expecting a lot of forests, where I don't think that these guys are the best option. I would like something that can operate quickly, so that's going to leave me either with the Kutai 90 at their 30 kph or the UDT Seals. If you compare these, you're going to see that they are pretty much the same unit. The weapon that they carry, the assault rifle, is exactly the same stat-wise. The only difference is the Mini-Me versus the Shorty. The Shorty fires a slightly higher caliber round, as we established. The accuracy on these things is similar, Rate of fire is lower, but suppression is higher. Considering that I find suppression pretty important, especially when you're dealing with other infantry, this is going to cause them morale damage faster. So what I want to do here is go with the UDT seals, and I want to have these guys be dropped off by the UH-60. Far better range than, for example, the UH-1H or the Bell 205, and they are a lot faster, 300 kph versus 220. Let's get 10 of these. Sorry. Let's get 10 of these elite guys in here and make sure that we can back up the Hebyung 90s if they are getting overmatched by other infantry. Then he has 14 shoe mats, which is a very high amount. Unfortunately, you can only bring these guys in HMVs, so Humvees. They do have a nice range, or sorry, a decent range of 2450. It's not great. The accuracy is 60% and armor penetration is 21. So you will go through almost all of the armor in the game, bar some of the super heavies, which have 22 or 23 frontal armor. I think having 14 of these again is too many. So what I'm going to do is delete 7 of these, because I find that on a map like another D-Day in Paradise, they are pretty situational. You may not always be able to use them. It really depends on where you are, where on the map you're working. So instead I'm considering getting another card of these UDT seals, just to make sure that I have a ton of infantry, and especially infantry that I can fly out to the front line quickly. Because with these guys I'm going to have the capacity to get them to that naval zone that I captured with the other naval units and the command infantry. It does give me a very high amount of infantry, but I believe that that is one of the main strengths of a marine deck, since their tanks are usually pretty crap and you may not always have the capacity to go naval. Moving on to support, the K9 Thunder, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, as I was doing a Blue Dragons or South Korea deck, I still have not used these units. It's just because I don't use Blue Dragons that much. But their stats look very solid, and I will be trying out this deck soon to make sure it works, because I want to do some more naval units. I haven't done those in quite a while. 75 MSSR. These guys can be useful if you want to clear out a forest and make sure that your other infantry can go after it. Because with these things you have a pretty bad range for an MLRS, but you do have a decent dispersion and nice HE power. So whatever is in that dispersion of 4.5 kilometers is going to receive some HE damage. It's going to panic or weaken the unit, and then your SEALs or Hebyung 90s can come in and destroy them. These guys, I will keep them in, but normally I would take a mortar carrier. Reason for that is that mortars can fire usually quite a lot faster, don't have this much of a supply hog of 20... you don't see the supplies of course, but MLRS are usually quite expensive to resupply, and mortars rarely need to be resupplied. But for now I'm going to keep these in. Echo put them in this deck for a reason, and I want to see if they work, or at least if they work for me. Then some 10 SAM short arrows. These are pretty nice units, if only their accuracy were higher. The 40% accuracy, even if you buff it with some hardened veterancy, is still not great. So what you can do here is have these units engage helicopters beyond the maximum ATGM range of the helicopter, and they're not radar guided, so not even a seed missile can go after this unit, to make sure that the way is clear for helicopters to come in. And that is something why you want to have the short arrow in your deck. And he has the closed arrow, another AA missile platform. Unfortunately, you don't exactly get a lot of air defense guns in this deck. You get the KM163, it's not radar guided, its accuracy is pretty bad. It does not carry a good amount of rounds. Range against helicopters is not that good. You're going to be inside the ATGM range of helicopters, which is not something that you want your AA guns to be. Now of course the closed arrow definitely has this problem, but it usually fires so fast that the enemy helicopter will go down before the ATGM arrives. And then the M42 AAG, stay away from this unit. 250 kilometer autonomy means that it might not even reach the front line. Off-road speed is pretty good. Accuracy is so bad that this thing couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if it was in the barn. So we're not going to use this thing anytime soon. Last unit he has in here is the Carrier Hawk. Pretty decent AA. You don't get a lot of missiles on them, of course, as they are the Hawk system. But their HE damage is very, very high. Range against helicopters 26-25. That's the same range as most HGMs on helicopters. But you get this thing to kill airplanes. He went with 5 of these, giving them slightly more accuracy, and I think that this should be enough. Especially considering that we have 10 AA infantry in here, and a lot of other AA infantry, or AA units like the short arrow and the closed arrow. Tank-wise, you get pretty shit options. You got the M41A1, also known as, I believe, the Walker Bulldog. This unit is not going to reach the front line on its own. 200 kilometer autonomy is some of the worst in the game, if not the worst. So this thing is something that you're going to constantly have to babysit before it reaches the front line. Then, once it reaches the front line, it's going to get one-shot by anything that happens to look at it, because it has 2 frontal armor, and it is lucky if it can hit the enemy at all, with an accuracy of 40% and an armor penetration of 8, so stay away from the M41A1. M48A5K is something that's definitely a lot better, but it's only a 35-point tank. And that means that you're not going to get stellar performance out of this thing. The autonomy is definitely a lot better than what we found on the M41A1. Armor is 5 points frontally, which is not going to be stopping a lot of tank rounds. Accuracy is pretty bad, 40%. It does not have stabilizer. You want to be sitting still if you want to fire the main gun on this pattern, and the armor penetration is only 13. You can use these guys to support your units like the infantry. Doing that will allow you to have a faster and longer range anti-vehicle capacity, while your infantry can possibly close in and destroy a tank as it gets too close to the infantry. But don't expect these things to take out heavy tanks. They can do that, but you're going to have to flank the enemy. You're going to want to have that side armor exposed to you, and then you can easily penetrate it with 13 armor penetration. So if you have a super heavy, make sure you come in from, let's say the super heavy's on this crossroads of these lines. You come in with some tanks from this angle, you come in with some tanks from that angle, and the tank is not going to be able to decide where to go. So let's say its frontal armor is looking down this line. You can easily shoot the side armor, and that will go through the side armor of the tank. Reconnaissance wise, he has the Suzak Day. You don't get a lot of options here again. Suzak Day are, well, they're base infantry, or base recon infantry. 5 strength is going to mean that these things are not supposed to go into combat. They do have an M16 and a law, but it's only a defensive weapon. They're not the fastest reconnaissance infantry, only 20 kph. JSDF Rangers would be a slight upgrade, but you're going to have to sacrifice availability of 2 units. And these things can actually fight. They have shock level infantry training. They got a sniper rifle, which is something that is interesting because I would not recognize this thing as a sniper. They have a submachine gun and an M72 Law, so they're going to be able to deal with some vehicles if they can hit it, because 30% accuracy is not that good. But you get these guys mostly for their faster speed. I believe that the stealth in these units is the same. Echo here went with the Suzak Day in the Bell 205. I'm not entirely sure why the Bell 205, and unfortunately I spent all of the UH-60P cards, which is only 2 of them, on the transport of the UDT SEALs, so we don't exactly have any fast transports for the Suzak Day. We're just going to use these guys as passive spotters. Reconnaissance chopper, the only choice you have is the OH-6. Decent helicopter. It's not stellar. It only has very good optics. Strength of 4, so any kind of AA missile is going to shoot it down, even the ones carried by infantry. Keep that in mind. These things are not designed to take a hit. And then he has the Hachi Nanashiki. I like this reconnaissance unit. It is fast, it has medium optics, it has a autocannon. It is not as good as the KAV-90, but this thing can still pack quite a punch, and you get a decent amount of them. You get 10 of them. With that, you can support your infantry at medium to close range, depending on whether the infantry is out in the open or in a forest, of course, because fighting in forest with these vehicles might not be too easy, since an autocannon needs a decent line of sight, and that is not something that you can always get in the forest. All solid choices here, none that I would change. In the vehicles, we find 14 KM-132 napalm vehicles. Nice units to have. Always try to get some napalm units in your deck. I know that the Commonwealth doesn't have napalm vehicles, or napalm infantry for that matter. They do have napalm infantry and I believe assault engineers, or their variant of it. But a napalm vehicle is always going to have a lot better range. 1,000 meters means you can smoke out any kind of infantry, so long as it's not an HGM carrier, of course, because a Concours M is going to shoot this thing down long before it can start shooting at the Concours. Definitely something you want to have in your deck, so I'm going to leave these in. Then he has Mitsubishi 106mm autocannon, not autocannons, that would be nice. Recoilless rifles. These guys are pretty much ambushers, and I think that he put these in just as filler material because they are not that good. They are usually capable of destroying something above their own 10-point value, so that does make it a decent trade. Their accuracy is not that good, their armor penetration is okay for a 10-point unit. Autonomy is great at 1,000 kilometers. You will never have to refuel these units unless you keep them moving all the time. And their off-road speed is a little on the low end at only 55, but you can still do quite a distance with this 55 kph off-road. When using these Mitsubishi 106s, make sure you deploy them in an ambush position. Never ever be attacking with these things, because any unit, whether it has an autocannon, a main gun, a Gatling gun like helicopters, a machine gun, a law, anything is going to one-shot this unit. The best use of these is defensive, ambushing, making sure you set up choke points, and then have a couple of these guys go to work. Alternative would be the Renza 106. These things carry slightly less ammo, have the same speed. They have a little bit more accuracy and a little bit more armor penetration. Rate of fire is slightly higher, and that means that they're going to chew through their own ammunition supplies faster than 1 minute. So these things will fire very, very quickly and go out of ammo very, very quickly. But their autonomy is terrible, so I'm not going to touch these guys. And then the K113 TOW 2. Again, ambushers. Don't let me catch you attacking with these things, because they're not designed to do that. They're ambushers. You want to have these guys set up in forests or near a town where they can use the town itself as a piece of cover. Interesting to see, by the way, that the animation goes right through the head of the driver. Not entirely sure why they did that, but it looks a little silly. Anyway, it's a decent unit. It has good off-road speed, great autonomy since it's just a Jeep. No armor at all. Armor penetration of 25 and accuracy of 70%, so we definitely are solid in the anti-tank capacity here. Helicopter-wise, 2 AH-1Ts. Good helicopters. You don't get a lot of options again because you're quite limited due to the Marines specialization. But they do have TOW 2 missiles, they got Hydra rocket pods and a Vulcan. It's just your average AH-1H or AH-1T. And then in the Air Tab, he has quite a few airplanes here. Again, not that many options because you're limited by the Marines. 2 KF-16 Block 52Ds. These guys are nice aircraft. They are a combination of a seaplane and an air fighter. They got 2 of these HARM missiles, and they got 4 AMRAAMs. They are at veteran, and that means that this accuracy is going to be cranked up possibly to 75% would be my guess. Great turn radius, strength of 10 of course as all aircraft. 50% ECM is very nice. Combine this with the fact that it's a seaplane and a fighter, and it makes it particularly difficult to shoot down whatever mission you have for it. Good speed, Time over target is pretty low though. So that means that this thing can only operate in your map for 60 seconds before it's going to have to pull out. But usually when you pull in these things, you fire off a couple of these harms or you fire off some AMRAMs and you evac them because they're not meant for dogfighting. They're not designed to do that. He has 2 of these. I might switch those out for another fighter like the F4EG. The problem I have with the KF-16Cs is that it does not have a short-range air-to-air missile. And that means it's going to rely heavily on the AMRAM. If it cannot kill the enemy with the AMRAM, it's going to have to turn into position and try to get a shot at it with the Vulcan, which is not the best option. It can work. It can definitely work and kill airplanes, but it's not the best option. So the AMRAMs are going to be the main weapon of air-to-air. The F4EGs have slightly more options. They got the AIM-9F, which is definitely not a great weapon. AIM-9Ms would be something that I would consider, but looking at how bad this fighter is, I'm not going to touch it, even if you can get 2 of these guys at Elite. Here's the F4EG Kai. This thing is a multi-role. Sorry, my voice still hasn't entirely recovered. The F4EG Kai has 8 340 kilogram bombs and 4 Sparrows. If you can combine an F4EG Kai for 125 points with a KF-16C 460, you're going to be capable of shooting down pretty much any plane due to the volume of missile fire you can put on it. The M9 Sparrow or the AIM-7F Sparrow, not the best accuracy-wise, only 40%. HE power, not the best either, but you get this thing mostly for its HE bombing capacity and because you get the multi-role capacity on it, the Sparrows. Then he has 4 cards of Peace Pheasant 1s. These are, I suppose you could call them the carpet bombers of the South Korean Air Force. They carry a very, very high amount of these Mark 82s, 18 of these bombs, and they're going to deploy them in a large, strung-out pattern. So it's going to be pretty much a rectangular shape where they deploy these bombs. Keep in mind that these things, if you have infantry entrenched in a town, will weaken them, but rarely, if ever, destroy them. That is something you really have to keep in mind. This thing is not the equivalent of the F111C that I just covered in the Anzac motorized deck. It does not have the same capacity to do a lot of damage to very heavily armored targets. Don't expect these things to do that, but you can clear out infantry, weaken or panic units so that your own infantry, for example, has a much easier time destroying them. Then he has 2 cards of Peace Pheasant 1s. He has these guys at Elite. That means that they have a pretty good accuracy. I'm going to delete one and have a sneak peek at the accuracy. You get plus 30% accuracy, so the accuracy for this thing goes up to 52%. You get 4 Fire and Forget Mavericks. Their ECM is 20%. It is okay, but don't expect these things to rely or to survive a very heavily contested air zone which has a lot of AA. They will go down to that fire, and you're going to lose a 90-point plane. He has 2 of these at Elite, which is a good choice because you want to have these missiles hit. I believe that they will not fire all missiles in one go. It depends a little bit on the amount of targets that you have for these guys. Some of them, if you have, for example, 2 to 4 tanks, they're going to fire all of them. If you have 1 tank, they might not fire all. And you may need to just evac them manually, otherwise they're going to keep circling that area. With this setup, he has pretty much all of the Air Force units that you can possibly get. One thing that I think is too many is having 4 of these Peace Pheasants, because I don't think that they are that good at what they do. So I'm going to delete 1 and see if I can spend that 1 card somewhere else. Sorry, that 1 point, but it doesn't look like it. So that explains his reasoning why he has another Peace Pheasant in here. So okay, we're going to add this thing back in and have a look at the Naval Tab. He seems to be going pretty heavy anti-ship capacity here. 1 elite Congo, sorry, not elite, 1 hardened Congo, a lot of anti-ship planes. I would personally not use the Tram Intruder, because the Tram Intruder flies at 750 kph, and these things fly at 1000 kilometers per hour. So what I'm going to do here is delete the Tram Intruder. I'm going to stick with his plan of having a lot of anti-ship planes. But the F-111G has the same amount of missiles, 4 in particular, as the Tram Intruder. It is 10 points more expensive, its ECM is 10% worse, but the main reason I'm picking these guys is that you get the same amount of missiles, but they travel at 1000 kilometers. And that means that with this, you're going to be capable of dealing quite a bit of damage if you combine all of these planes. This gives you 2 missiles per F-18, so it's going to be 4 missiles for this card, 4 missiles for this card, and then 8 missiles for this card. So you can deploy 16 anti-ship missiles onto a single target, and if you have a particularly large Red 4 fleet, you can really go to town with them. The other units that he has in here is a Tomcat. I don't think that we need the Tomcat, because the Tomcat, while it is a nice interceptor, I think that we can use this slot better for another ship. We have a large air capacity in the form of the KF-16 Block 52s. So I'm going to kick out the Tomcat. And since he has only 2 actual ships here, the Congo and the Lafayette, I'm going to bring in another card of ships. Let's see, Coastal, Command, Escorts. We don't need supplies, he already has an LCU in here. Hatsuyukis are definitely good units with good good CWIS. That's what I'm looking at now. Chamseries are not that great. They are nice against enemy missiles that are incoming, but they're not as good as Hatsuyukis. Of course, you pay 3 times the price of a Chamsery for 1 Hatsuyuki, but you get 8 harpoons, a good main gun, and a lot of these Sea Sparrows, which can be very annoying to enemy shipping. Reason I'm going for more CWIS capacity here is because if you have 1 Congo and 2 Lafayettes, you are not very heavily defended. And this means that if the enemy comes in with quite a large amount of anti-ship planes, you're going to be in trouble. These ships will not be able to deal with all of the missiles, and you're going to start losing ships. So I'm going to go for 2 more Hatsuyuki. And I'm going to have a look at these STRB-90H. Look at the size difference of those. STRB-90H are great units, but I don't think that having 4 of them at hardened is the best option here. I want to have a bit more. Let's go for 5 a train. That gives me 1 more unit, and that immediately gives me 8 more Hellfire, so we can destroy some more tanks. These ships are river sailing ships, and that means that they cannot be targeted by anti-ship missiles. They cannot do damage to airplanes, unfortunately, but they have a nice grenade launcher on it, an M2 Browning, and the Hellfire can destroy pretty much any tank, and they have a great accuracy, even on the move. So with that, I think we have a good or decent naval tab here. I'm usually one who goes all naval or all airplanes, but Echo seems to do something in the middle. It is an option, and we're going to see if it works as I'm going to try out this deck. So with that, this is an overview of the deck. If you want to use it, the deck goes in the description down below. I mentioned it yesterday as I was doing my motorized review. All of the deck codes that have been sent in before, let's say, February 13th are no longer valid, because that's when the DLC got released, and somehow it invalidated all of the deck codes. So if you have any deck codes that you need, you're going to have to recreate the deck yourself, because I will not be doing repairs, if you want to call it as such, on the deck guides that I have done so far. The deck guides themselves are still valid. You're just going to have to rebuild those things from scratch, because I'm not going to spend my time recreating 50 to 80 deck reviews. I'm not sure how many I have on the channel, and you're perfectly capable of building those yourself. So, with that, end of the video. I hope you like this deck. Let me know how you have done with a Blue Dragons Marines deck, or if you've used any Marines deck before. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you, getting your decks, and seeing your replays. So links to sending those in are in the description down below. With that, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.